Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Another woman in her place would have been in hysterics, but Adelina didn't even cry when the door closed behind Valerio forever. Only in the days following his departure, she was plagued by an inexplicable feeling of guilt. According to the genre, she should be feeling completely different emotions right now. For example, pity for herself and hatred for her husband. But no, in Adelina's soul, there was complete calmness, and only occasionally did that unpleasant feeling ripple through the sea of tranquility. She constantly thought about how Valerio wouldn't have left if she had. And then it was a dead end because her consciousness refused to answer the question, what should she have done for him to stay? For the past few days, Adelina had been trying to answer this question herself. She understood that her own life and the fate of her children depended on it. The young woman mentally tried to solve a tangled crossword puzzle, patiently going through each day that had left some kind of impression in her memory. Her small car, which her parents had given her for her 30th birthday, confidently moved through the streets of the evening city. And to Adelina, it seemed like she was not driving a stylish hatchback of an indecently bright red color, but her own life. Everything depended on which direction she would turn at the nearest intersection. Her hand unconsciously reached for the control panel, and a life-affirming melody poured out of the speakers. Adelina, in some wild ecstasy, began to sing along with the performer at the top of her lungs. The woman didn't have vocal talents, but it didn't stop her from singing from the heart and even attempting risky vocalizations. Perhaps her miniatures came out too loud because passing cars honked persistently. But those signs of attention only added to her excitement. "Guys, I'm fine, everything's all right with me." Minor sounds poured out of the speakers, and Adelina sadly said aloud, "Good, but not enough. I never thought I was capable of such actions. But I'm ready to do it again, and I don't care about public opinion. I've always had to compare myself to the best. I don't want to be in supporting roles anymore. I'll prove to him that I'm worth something too." This bright monologue, worthy of the best stage, was addressed to Valerio. These words probably accumulated in her heart for a long time, but after they were voiced, Adelina felt relieved. Only the feeling of guilt shrank into a tiny lump and hid in a distant corner of her soul. "It's okay, I'll figure it out with you too. After all, I'm strong." Her father had instilled the best qualities in his daughter from a young age. He often said, "Daughter, in youth, life seems endless, but as people grow old, they consider each day they've lived as a blessing. That's why you should strive to do good and helpful deeds." She didn't understand the meaning of those words back then. "Dad, why should we do that?" "To preserve each day in memory. Later, in the twilight years, you'll look back and remember, on this day, I helped an old lady, and on another day, I saved a bird. Dad, is it a good deed or a bad one when you let someone copy your homework?" Such questions from his daughter would put Senior Lozano in a dilemma, but he never avoided answering. Overall, Adelina believed she was very lucky with her parents. They were the best people on earth. And every day of her childhood was filled with their care and warmth. Adelina was a late child in the family. Senior Lozano and Senora Vidal were already in their mature age when they decided to join their lives. Both had a failed first experience in marriage, so they dated for almost 3 years before applying for marriage. Both spouses also prepared diligently for the arrival of a new addition to the family. The expectant mother strictly followed all the doctor's recommendations, and the expectant father attended special courses, although men were quite skeptical of such events at that time. Some of his male colleagues even openly laughed at him. "Our Marcelo is a future father. Well done. Maybe you'll go and give birth together with your wife?" They teased. "If it's necessary, I'll go, and there's nothing shameful about it." At that time, joint childbirth was a novelty for many countries, so not everyone welcomed such initiatives, and the male population was outraged by this prospect. Husbands and fathers sometimes made predictions about this imported innovation. "It won't catch on here. They're all going crazy, chasing equality and freedom. We have different traditions, and everything is clearly divided. Women give birth, and men raise children and earn a living. However, one could argue with the last statement, but no one dared to deny the inviolability of traditions. Therefore, Senior Lozano's bold decision remained unfulfilled, and he didn't witness Adelina's arrival into the world. However, this circumstance didn't diminish the joy of the newly minted father. With his last bit of cash, as salaries were only paid every few months, he hired performers from the cultural center and brought them to the maternity ward in beaten-up car. The mini-concert beneath the windows of the medical facility made a strong impression not only on the young mothers but also on the staff. Some nurses even shed tears due to an overflow of emotions. They only show such love in movies. What a great man. A real man. Of course, due to understandable reasons, Adelina doesn't remember the events of those days, but her mother loved to recount this touching story. Each time, new details of her first days of life would emerge. When they brought you for your first feeding, I was even scared. On that day, 8 more boys were born, and only 1 girl. All the boys were so big and chubby. They cried at the top of their lungs, and my little daughter looked like a tiny frozen berry among them. You didn't even cry, you squealed like a kitten. Although Senora Vidal spoke fondly about her daughter's shortcomings in the first days of her life, Adelina didn't quite enjoy being compared to an abandoned kitten by her mother. It was only later, when she gave birth to her first son, Anton, that she realized that a mother doesn't care about a child's appearance. But life is a harsh thing, and it doesn't spare even little children. While the girl was a miracle to her parents, others didn't see it that way. The first time Adelina encountered injustice was in kindergarten. That day remained etched in her memory. On the eve of the first spring holiday, the children were preparing gifts for their mothers. Besides cute crafts, it was decided to delight the women with a small concert. The teachers organized the program and assigned the acts. It was then that Adelina showed initiative for the first time in her conscious life. Let me learn a song or a poem. I have a good memory. One of the teachers looked at the child strangely. Girl, it's not enough to just have a good memory here. You also need to have a cute little face, and in that regard. Adelina saw how another teacher nudged her colleague forcefully. What nonsense are you spouting in front of the child? Nothing unusual. I'm just used to telling the truth. Let her get used to it. She'll have to hear many times in the future that she looks like a little mouse. Such a gray and unremarkable one. Of course, Adelina, at her 3.5 years of age, didn't understand the full meaning of what the teachers had said, but her memory was indeed good. When her mother came to pick her up from the kindergarten, she retold everything right in front of the teacher who had criticized the girl's appearance. Adelina added, on her own accord. They didn't even give me a poem, they gave everything to other kids. And I speak well and sing loudly. And Pia stutters, but she's pretty, and now she'll sing the main song. From hurt, Adelina began to cry, and the teacher was ready to sink through the floor out of shame. Senora Vidal tried to speak calmly, although her voice trembled with indignation. What kind of casting are you conducting here? Who allowed you to damage children's psyche? I won't let this go. Tomorrow, I'll go to the education department. Adelina and her mother didn't attend the celebration. The teacher who had behaved inappropriately also didn't appear in their group anymore. One could rejoice in the triumph of justice, but Adelina was still tried to be hidden behind the backs of her peers when it came to responsible events. She also remembered her first day of school life. By that time, the girl had already internalized the rules of human society and no longer sought to showcase her talents. She habitually blended into the crowd of her peers because, in the collective, her protruding ears and colorless eyebrows on her freckled face were less noticeable. The ceremonial assembly went smoothly, and she, along with everyone else, clapped happily when a tall high school student carried a junior school first year on his shoulder, holding a symbolic bell-shaped rattle in her hand. Of course, deep down, Adelina envied the girl because she really wanted to be in her place. But she understood that with her unremarkable appearance, it was impossible. After the assembly, when the children dispersed to their classrooms for their first lesson ever, an unfamiliar boy from an older class pointed at her and shouted, "Hey, guys, look at this inbred mouse." Senora Vidal was very worried about her daughter, but with an unaffected look, Adelina said, "Mom, maybe the boy wanted to call me big-eared because I do have big ears. He just mixed up the words. Don't worry, I'm used to it, and I'm not offended." Adelina accidentally overheard her mother telling her father about this outrageous incident in the evening. "Marcelo, I'm so worried about Adelina. Why is everyone picking on her? In my opinion, her appearance is perfectly normal for a child." "Inessa, don't worry so much. Our Adelina is better than everyone else and more beautiful than anyone. And she has a strong character for a 6-year-old child. That's exactly what scares me the most. I'm afraid she might become cruel. There are many stories where childhood complexes lead to terrible consequences in adulthood. I'm sure Adelina won't have any complexes. She's a very clever girl and quickly grasped the rules of the game. And appearance is something that can change. We'll see with our own eyes the transformation of an ugly duckling into a beautiful swan." Unfortunately, the father's predictions didn't come true, and Adelina never became a beauty. However, her unremarkable appearance no longer scared anyone, and, for the most part, no one paid attention to it in school. The thing was, Adelina excelled in all areas. She was sent by the school to various subject Olympiads, and she always returned victorious. One day of triumph, in particular, stood out when she left even the high school students far behind in an intellectual competition. It was a pure victory. That day was one of the happiest in Adelina's life. The middle school student became the pride of the whole school. She was featured on television shows, and even the regional newspaper wrote about her. But fame is a fleeting phenomenon, and Adelina understood that perfectly. She also realized once and for all that intelligence and knowledge hold even greater value than appearance. On the day of receiving her diploma, no one remembered Adelina's appearance anymore. Teachers predicted a promising future for her, and her classmates looked at her with undisguised envy. The first beauty of the class, with straight C's on her diploma, deliberately said out loud, "Some people are so lucky. She doesn't amount to anything herself, but she got the golden diploma." Someone defended the unlucky graduate. "Adelina earned her gold honestly, and you ended up with a second-hand diploma because you're like that grasshopper from Jean de La Fontaine's Grasshopper and Ant fable. Just envy Crus. Any university will welcome Adelina with open arms, while you struggle to get into some rundown college." The parents watched their daughter from the sidelines, and both cried tears of happiness. "Inessa, what a wonderful daughter we've raised. So many kind words were said about our Adelina today. I have to admit, my dear wife, that I've never been as happy as I am today. Marcelo, today is the happiest day of my life too. Even on our wedding day, I didn't feel this good." There was one more person at the ceremonial assembly, or rather, a girl who sincerely rejoiced in Adelina's successes and mourned the fact that she wouldn't meet her in the school corridor during the long break. Such feelings were experienced by Nina Solar on that sunny day in June, for whom Adelina was even more than a friend. All people can be divided into two categories. Some genuinely rejoice in the successes of their friends, while others only express such feelings in words and deep down envy and dream of someday getting back at the lucky ones. Adelina had her share of enemies, but all attempts by the ill-wishers to unsettle the top student failed. When she accidentally discovered a mouse in her school backpack, contrary to the organizers' expectations, she didn't scream, but instead placed the animal on her palm and even stroked its back. Later, she released the mouse back into the wild. Some people chuckled behind her back. A fisherman recognizes another fisherman, and a mouse smells its own kind. In simpler terms, ones won't harm their own. Next time, one of the pranksters smeared the chair where the top student was sitting with carpenter's glue, but even this prank didn't succeed. From a distance, Adelina noticed a suspicious sheen, and from the tense expression of one of her classmates, she unmistakably identified the prankster and approached him with a request. "Pablo, your chair is higher, and this one is uncomfortable for me. Let's switch." The boy blushed, which the teacher perceived as shyness. Pena, when a girl asks, a real man should give in. After that, Pablo had no choice but to endure a lesson sitting in the glued chair. Later, his friends struggled to peel him off the furniture, but they couldn't save his pants. After classes, Pena waited for Adelina outside the school. "You think you're so smart?" Adelina laughed in the loser's face. "Pena, you know about the boomerang effect. That's what you got. You're laughing too soon, Lozano. Next time, we'll have a completely different conversation. Consider your days numbered. I've started the countdown. Pena, with your knowledge of mathematics, you're bound to make a mistake." The girl laughed again and headed home. She heard Pablo shout after her, "Lozano, the one who laughs last always wins. Now it's my turn." 5 minutes later, Adelina had already forgotten about the classmates' threats, but 2 days later, she had to recall Pablo's words. In order to save time, Adelina, like many kids in her neighborhood, took a shortcut through a small park. The place was unpopular among the townspeople, so everyone tried to pass through it as quickly as possible. Adelina also quickened her pace when she entered the park. From a distance, she noticed a group of teenagers near a long inoperative fountain. It was too late to turn back, and Adelina herself didn't allow any display of weakness. She hastened her steps, hoping to pass the enemy line. But Pena blocked her path. "Well, Lozano, shall we laugh?" The crowd of onlookers burst into laughter. "Pablo, maybe we should bathe her in the fountain." "We could, but it's not working." "Then how should we punish her?" "Oh, guys, I have an exclusive plan for our top student. You see that structure with letters everyone understands, M and F? Pablo, you're a genius. People crave a spectacular sight." When Adelina realized that she should have run away from there, it was already too late. The teenagers surrounded her and then took her by the arms, dragging her towards the public restroom. She struggled and screamed, even kicking one of the bullies in the eye, but the odds were clearly against her. From somewhere to the side, a girl's scream was heard. "Kia!" Then came the sound of a strong blow, followed by another scream, this time from one of the avenging pack. Adelina barely had time to comprehend what was happening before another battle cry resounded, and another bully writhed on the ground in pain. The remaining 3 members of the gang swiftly fled the scene. Adelina looked at the girl, about 12 or 13 years old, with eyes wide open, unable to believe that she had single-handedly defeated 2 assailants. The young judoka extended her hand. "Nina." Adelina accepted the friendly gesture. "How did you end up here?" "I always go through the park from school, you know, as a shortcut." "I heard you screaming from afar and rushed to help," Nina explained. "Tell me, Nina, where did you learn all this?" Unexpectedly, the girl blushed. "My dad taught me. He used to be a champion, but then he broke his arm and had to leave professional sports. Now he works as a coach. I've been practicing since I was 6, and I already have a blue belt. Soon I'll have a brown one." Although Adelina didn't understand much about the sports ethics of martial arts, she nodded meaningfully. "Wow, that's amazing." Nina was pleased with the praise. "I've wanted to meet you for a long time, but I couldn't bring myself to approach you. And then this opportunity came up. I'm sorry for the impertinent question. Why were you hesitant to approach me? You're the best student, and you're a year older than me. Nina, you're adorable. Does age or any other petty things matter when friendship connects people?" The girl looked at Adelina with an enchanted gaze. "Will you be friends with me?" "Of course. Now I'm obliged to repay you for saving me. And you understand that I'm not talking about money or material things, right? Maybe you have trouble with a particular subject?" Nina jumped with joy. "I'm failing math completely. I just can't grasp these cosines and sines." "Don't worry, I'll help you. We can start our lessons today." From that day on, Nina became a frequent guest at the Lozano's house. The girls would study for 2 hours every day, and then enjoy tea with delicious pastries prepared by Senora Vidal. But the one most delighted by it all was Senor Lozano. "Adelina, it's wonderful that you have a true friend." The girl corrected her father. "Dad, did you mean a female friend?" "No, honey. I said what I meant. You see, these words with a common root have slightly different meanings. With a female friend, you can hang out, communicate, share experiences, but only a friend is capable of protecting you. This girl Nina is a true friend. I hope I didn't make a mistake in her." Senor Lozano's prediction about Nina was accurate. Growing up in a sports family, the girl possessed strong-willed qualities and was always open to connections. She never boasted, although she had things to be proud of too. Soon people started talking about the pair. What a big love of hand and glove. Although both are lacking in beauty, their ambition is off the charts. The girls paid no attention to the gossip, especially since they didn't feel inferior. Thanks to their good upbringing and clear understanding of their life goals, both students had already shaped their personalities. They treated such talk just as an adult perceives childish pranks. The only thing they regretted was the impending separation. But the girls found a good way to overcome this obstacle. Adelina applied to one university for the specialization in software engineering and nanotechnology. These were completely new fields, and many young people dreamed of acquiring future-oriented professions. This meant that Adelina, for the first time in her life, had to compete fiercely for a spot among equals, as almost all applicants were medalists. There was a treacherous moment when Adelina almost gave up. She called Nina to seek advice. "Nina, you can't even imagine the number of medalists per square meter here. I'm even scared." Her friend calmly replied, "Fear is normal. It's bad when a person starts panicking, and from the sound of your voice, I can tell you're on the verge of despair. But I don't understand, what's causing the panic? I also get scared when I step onto the tatami and face an unfamiliar opponent. But that's the philosophy of any competition, to overcome fear and win. In your case, it's much simpler because you just need to overcome your own fear. That's it." Adelina successfully passed the additional tests and was admitted to the faculty. The first year at any educational institution is considered the most challenging, so she devoted all her time to studying. But despite the heavy workload, as the student of a prestigious university liked to say, it didn't prevent her from communicating with her friend once a week. During their phone conversations, the girls shared the main events and their plans. In one of those sessions, Nina joyfully announced, "Adelina, I've decided to apply to the closest to yours university for the Faculty of Sports Psychology. So, very soon we'll have the opportunity to meet in person." "That's wonderful. But what about big sports? Weren't you dreaming of winning championships?" "My friend, you yourself told me that we need to realistically assess our abilities, and that's what I did. I realized that representing the school is one thing, but representing the country is a completely different responsibility. In short, I don't measure up to the highest level. And the career span in sports is too short, so I decided to dedicate myself to another meaningful pursuit. After all, training future champions is also an honorable endeavor." Although Nina's voice carried a hint of sadness, it was clear that this was her final decision. Adelina wanted to encourage her. "Perhaps you're right. It's important to plan our lives with an eye on the future. I'm truly happy for you." Nina was admitted to the university on her first attempt. Although her academic performance was modest, her achievements in sports played a decisive role. This period was marked by another remarkable event that brought the girls closer, a friendship developed between their parents. Shared concerns and experiences unite people. Like many girls her age, Adelina secretly dreamed of a great and beautiful love. During her school years, she immersed herself in popular novels filled with more tragedy than happiness. After reading a book, she would walk around for a few days under its influence. However, she never shared her feelings with anyone, not even Nina. The reason for her secrecy was her face features. Although Adelina had grown accustomed to being considered plain, her essence refused to accept such a situation. As a result, she began experimenting with cosmetics, and she was quite successful. Nina had a keen understanding of makeup techniques, and her lessons benefited Adelina's appearance. After enrolling in university, Adelina forgot that her appearance didn't conform to beauty standards. Firstly, there were more pressing matters to attend to. Secondly, most of the female students looked like Adelina. Many of the girls wore glasses with thick lenses, which helped her completely forget about her supposed flaw. During one of their get-togethers, Adelina decided to broach the forbidden topic. "Nina, I bet you have plenty of admirers in our class, right? You always look so fashionable and confident." Her friend looked at Adelina strangely. "Adelina, I'm amazed by your naivety. You're older than me, after all. Just 1 year older. At our age, a year doesn't matter at all." "That's correct, but I mentioned age for a reason. Haven't you realized yet that life is essentially a struggle for a place in the sun? It's natural selection, initiated by nature itself. And you know from your school biology course that only the strongest survive in this process. Otherwise, they will simply be subdued and trampled upon. And to reach the finish line, one can use any means necessary. That's why mimicry is widespread in the natural world at all levels, including human society." Adelina looked at her friend with wide eyes for a long time, unable to recover from her surprise. Was this really the same slender girl who excelled in various wrestling techniques? No, now she saw an educated, confident young woman in front of her, capable of philosophical musings. "Nina, I never cease to be amazed by you. Where did you acquire all this knowledge? You won't believe it, but it's thanks to your school. I caught every word you said on the fly, and you diligently convinced me day after day that knowledge is the foundation of everything. Well, and of course, my future profession imposes certain obligations. Oh, as for suitors, my situation is average. But why did you ask about that?" "I don't know. Just curious, I guess. It seems like at our age, it's expected to have a boyfriend," Nina remarked with feigned annoyance. "Adelina, I don't recognize you. Where is your former confidence and optimism? And what does age have to do with it?" Adelina tried to regain her composure, but the excess of emotions prevented her from pulling herself together. Nina realized that without a good shake-up, Adelina wouldn't say anything. She roused herself with a warrior's cry and playfully put her friend on her back. "Adelina, come on. It's funny to see you struggling as if you were a schoolgirl." Adelina laughed, and the internal stiffness disappeared. "You made an unfortunate comparison. Modern schoolgirls would surpass anyone by 100 points. I just got used to considering relationships with the opposite sex as a closed topic for me, to put it mildly." "Another nonsense. You created that mindset in your own head. You just need to flip the switch and enjoy life. From the many half-said phrases, I understand that something is happening on your personal front. I wasn't mistaken, was I?" Adelina breathed a sigh of relief. "You hit the bullseye. Yes, I have a young man now. But due to lack of practical experience, I don't know how to behave with him." "How?" "Natural. There's no need to come up with clever moves if you genuinely like someone. Tell me, do you like your secret hero?" A blissful smile appeared on the girl's face. "Nina, I'm not exactly sure. But I think I do. When I'm with him, I feel at ease, we can talk about anything. And honestly, I don't want to be apart from him. That's a very good start. That's often how love begins. But don't lose your head, nonetheless." Her friend's warning passed by without settling in the infatuated Adelina's consciousness. And there was no doubt that she was in love with Valerio. Their first encounter resembled a plot from the novels she had read before. As a second-year student, she urgently needed to prepare a research paper and went to the university library. Valerio was already diligently working on a similar assignment at the neighboring table. They had occasionally crossed paths in the intricate mazes of the university before, but they were not closely acquainted. This time, when Adelina appeared, Valerio greeted her with a gesture. She responded with a nod, her hair neatly styled in braids and twists. Engrossed in their work, the young people didn't notice how it had become completely dark outside and the reading room had emptied. The librarian had asked them several times to leave, but they requested just a little more time. Realizing that her pleas had no effect on these zealous students, the woman turned off the lights. It was unexpected. The young people were disoriented, trying to find their way to the exit in the darkness, but the unfamiliar room was filled with obstacles at every step, chairs, tables, and other furniture. Valerio laughed. I feel like I'm a character in a video game right now. To advance to the next level, behind the door where a stern lady awaits, we'll have to endure a dozen bumps. Adelina found their difficult situation amusing too. But if we don't make it in time, a game over sign will light up above the door, and we'll be stuck here forever. That's why we need to hurry, so the kind lady doesn't lock the door. Let's hold hands, it will be easier for us to navigate the obstacles together, and we'll have an extra chance. The young man firmly grasped the girl's hand and took the first step into the unknown. The sound of falling furniture immediately echoed, and the lights came back on. In the doorway stood the formidable silhouette of the librarian. What on earth are you dunces doing? Valerio calmly replied to her question with a question. Why did you turn off the lights? Did you even consider that we could break our arms and legs in the darkness? How many times can I warn you? What was I supposed to do if you don't understand in words? Adelina had no idea that a dialogue consisting solely of questions could be so interesting. In the end, the unfriendly lady threatened to report them to the dean's office. Our university is for respectable people. Prominent scientists studied within these walls, and we still have everything ahead of us. Who knows, maybe in 10 years, you'll remember how you expelled 2 Nobel laureates from your library. And believe me, you'll feel very ashamed of your unkind act. Valerio gave a bow to the bewildered lady and they ran out laughing onto the street. Now I must escort you. Such a vivid introduction requires a continuation. Are you okay with that? Excitement filled Adelina's soul and body, and she jokingly replied. If we all started the game together, then logically, we should proceed through all subsequent levels together as well. You know, that's a very fitting comparison. But still, I really want our relationship to grow into something more than a video game. After all, we're not just drawn characters, we're living people. I'm not against that development either, but there's one but. The young man looked at the girl with surprise. Let me guess. Are you married? No. Then you must be an alien, and your spaceship will arrive to pick you up? No, not that either. Then I give up. We haven't even introduced ourselves yet. Right. But we'll fix that right now. Besides, I know your name is Adelina. And I'm Valerio. Adelina laughed wholeheartedly at the guy's jokes, and her face blushed, with mischievous sparks dancing in her eyes. The young man openly admired her. Adelina, if you only knew how beautiful you are. I've never met such a lovely girl before. For the first time, Adelina heard those words, and she felt her head spinning with happiness. Just a few weeks later, Valerio and Adelina felt a strong attachment to each other. In his usual playful manner, the young man explained this phenomenon. Adelina, we're lucky that we met each other so quickly. Have you heard the beautiful legend about soulmates? Of course, and you're saying that we are 2 halves of the same whole? And do you think otherwise? It's just that the heavenly forces didn't scatter us around the world like others, but dropped us in the same place. Perhaps the workday was coming to an end, and they simply didn't have any other option. Well, it can happen if we don't seize the chance the angels have given us. Valerio, you always speak in riddles. Aren't we seeing each other every day already? The girl once again felt the same loving gaze from the young man. He gently pulled her closer and kissed her. Just seeing each other isn't enough for me. I want more. I want to see you every minute, feel your breath. Adelina remained silent and anxiously awaited the continuation of this love song, but Valerio succinctly concluded his confession. Let's get married. Valerio, what about our studies? What will we tell our parents? Adelina, listen to me. We are adults and we should make decisions for ourselves. Is a marriage certificate an obstacle to obtaining a diploma? Probably not. Exactly. And tell me, why should we follow the accepted standards? Don't you want to do something without prompting? To make an important decision on your own? Valerio, I really want to, but how will we live? Like everyone else. Believe me, there are no problems that cannot be solved. My parents got married when they were students, and a year later, I was born. But that didn't prevent them from getting an education and successfully advancing in their careers. Imagine how surprised everyone will be when they find out that we are already a family. Perhaps it was the desire to surprise everyone that motivated the young couple when they decided on a secret marriage. Without telling anyone a word, they submitted their application. Spring arrived, and the whole world dressed in blooming attire. The hearts of the two lovers were also filled with springtime feelings. Just before the important event, Adelina told Nina everything. Her friend took about 10 minutes to recover. Adelina, have you gone crazy? And how does that show? Well, for example, tell me, what are you planning to wear to the registry office? In worn-out jeans and a t-shirt? And instead of a veil, your head will be adorned with a baseball cap with some silly inscription. The bride's confidence waned slightly, but she didn't give up. You're talking as if I have nothing to wear at all. I have a decent suit in a classic style, and I can find a nice pair of shoes too. By the way, I came to you hoping to find support and assistance, and you. And why do you think I should, Adelina, urgently fix your shortcomings? Are you punishing your parents for some sins? Doesn't it occur to your formula-filled head that the most important event in their lives is their daughter's wedding? I don't know how things are in Valerio's family, but I'm sure his parents will be shocked too. Adelina realized that her friend was right. What would you do in my place? I would never find myself in your place because I'm not so thoughtless. But I would advise you to postpone the event. No, Nina, they say it's a bad omen. Upon Nina's insistence, the future newlyweds urgently called their parents, and in order for the wedding ceremony to be no less than others, they had to use rental services. But the parents of the bride and groom were still in a daze. They could hardly understand what was happening, so all the questions had to be settled by Natalia. When the culprits of the commotion put their signatures in the registry office, Senior Lozano asked, somewhat ironically, "And where do our newlyweds plan to spend their honeymoon?" Adelina and Valerio looked at each other in confusion, but the newlywed husband turned out to be more resourceful. "We'll take our exams and join a construction brigade." Senior Vargas liked his son's idea. "That's my boy. In his day, I was just as bold and cheeky. By the way, it's not a bad option for newlyweds, pure romance. Life in tents, mosquitoes, food from a common pot, and lots of work." The man turned to the bride's parents. "I'm just teasing my offspring. That's me all over. I also got married when I was a student." Senora Moya, Valerio's mother, contributed her thoughts to the discussion of the important matter. "Alejandro, it was a completely different time back then. And look at what kind of nonsense is happening now. Sometimes you don't even want to watch this." Senora Vidal nodded in solidarity as a woman, and only Senior Lozano remained silent. The newlyweds sat quietly, keeping their excitement hidden. The important event was celebrated in a small restaurant where there was no one else but the wedding party. Valerio's mother continued to express her dissatisfaction with modern life. But she was clearly leading the conversation towards something more important. Finally, she nudged her husband lightly. "Alejandro, why are you mumbling to yourself all the time? You wouldn't allow our children to wander around in tents and be mercilessly bitten by mosquitoes, would you?" Senior Montero glanced towards the newlyweds. My dear, joining a construction brigade is great. It's an excellent option for thrill seekers if they are independent enough. Let them handle their own problems from this day forward and take responsibility for their impulsive actions. But, Alejandro, he's our only son. Senor Lozano calmly said. Friends, let's raise our glasses to the young couple. Even though they caught us off guard, let's forgive them for this minor inconvenience. Advice and love to them. Nina cheerfully exclaimed. Kse Bazin. After the toast in honor of the newlyweds, Adelina's father spoke again. My wife and I have discussed it and decided to take care of their living arrangements. I've already booked a hotel room for 2 days, now we just need to find affordable housing. They can't go to a dormitory. Senor Montero shook his head and for the third time that evening said that his son takes after him. They say you can't escape your genes. That's my boy, through and through. Thank you, in-law, I fully support you. Honestly, I really wanted to send them to a construction brigade, somewhere near the swamps. But following your example, I'm forced to show mercy. I'll organize a trip for the two of them somewhere in the tropics. For the first time that evening, the newlyweds spoke up. Hooray! We'll have a real honeymoon. Although their married life began romantically, it quickly transitioned to the mundane and gray routines. The pitfalls of family life started appearing right away. Although their parents were always ready to support them and intervene in time, the young couple had a tough time. Lectures, exams, and sessions were not considered a normal family life. And then Adelina's pregnancy forced them to adjust their plans for the near future. The expectant mother's health raised concerns, and Valerio firmly stated, I should take an academic leave. But the parents of the young spouses were firmly against such a decision. Senora Moya especially insisted on continuing their studies. Under no circumstances should you take a break from your education, it will only become more difficult later. Senora Vidal supported Valerio's mother. In a few months, I'm going on a well-deserved retire. Of course, I still wanted to work, but for the sake of the children, I'll do what's expected and help them. Let them study, and I'll take care of my grandchild. The young couple gladly accepted such generous gifts. However, over time, greater sacrifices were required, and Adelina and Valerio began to perceive them as obligatory steps from the older generation. The parental support made their lives so much easier that just 3 years after the birth of Anton, they decided to have another child. This time, a girl arrived, bringing joy to both grandmothers. Senora Vidal and Senora Moya practically lived in their children's house, which caused discontent among the men. Senor Montero was the most indignant. Anya, how much longer will we pamper them? Don't you think our children have taken over our lives? His wife tried to resist, but it was clear that she had become very tired over the years. Alejandro, I understand your frustration, but who will help them if not us? Valerio is constantly on business trips, and Adelina is alone with 2 children and has a job too. Then she should quit her job and focus on the family. Alejandro, think about what you're saying. How will they live without any money? They should have thought about that earlier. Besides, Valerio earns decent money, and if they reduce their expenses a bit, they can live off his salary. What about Adelina? She's very talented and has a promising career ahead of her. A woman must choose one thing, either work or family. Senora Moya was appalled. I've been living with you for so many years and never suspected, Alejandro, that you hold such beliefs. Adelina's parents also argued on this topic, but their discussions were not as heated. However, despite the clear dependence of the younger generation, the parents continued to make sacrifices for the sake of their family's happiness. Meanwhile, cracks began to appear in the relationship between the spouses, and sometimes Adelina didn't recognize her husband. She couldn't understand where his cheerfulness and special jokes had gone. The head of the family increasingly came home irritated and, to avoid spoiling anyone's mood, locked himself in his office. The family had long moved from a rented apartment to their own house in the Moscow suburbs with the help of their parents. Although everything seemed prosperous from the outside, Adelina's intuition told her that the foundation of her happiness was fragile and could collapse at any moment. And soon, the woman received confirmation that her premonitions hadn't let her down. When Valerio returned from another business trip, she instinctively started going through his things. No, she didn't find any traces of lipstick or the scent of French cologne on his shirts, but a small business card fell out of his pants pocket with a woman named Loida's phone number on it. The woman had no intention of creating a scene of jealousy. After all, there could be purely business relations between her husband and this unfamiliar Loida. With the best intentions in mind, Adelina placed the blue card in the most noticeable place. But she didn't expect such an explosive reaction from her husband. Valerio yelled and waved his arms in outrage. "I didn't expect you, wife, to stoop to the banality of checking my pockets." The woman was stunned by his outburst. "Valerio, why are you shouting at me? This card just fell out of your pocket. And in general, I don't recognize you anymore. You've become completely different." Startled by their parents shouting, Aaron came out of the children's room. "Mom, are you fighting with Dad?" "No, sweetie, we're just talking." "But Elena said you're fighting. So I wanted to see for myself." "Everything is fine, go back to your room." The man calmed down a bit but decided to set the record straight. "Adelina, I'm warning you, if I notice anything like this again." Adelina's eyes darkened, and she regretted not following Natalia's example. Right now, she had the urge to yell Kia and pounce on her husband, but she suppressed the outburst of anger and interrupted the stream of threats and reproaches. "Don't you dare talk to me in that tone, ever." This warning had an effect on Valerio, but from that day on, the relationship between the spouses deteriorated completely. Therefore, Adelina decided not to tell Valerio for now that she was pregnant again. The woman didn't lose hope that the star of happiness would shine again in their cozy home. It is said that trouble never comes alone, and it proved to be true. The tense relationship in the family and the unresolved issue of a third pregnancy were compounded by another unpleasant event. The New Year holidays had barely passed when Valerio's father called. "Son, come quickly. Your mom is not well, she's in intensive care." Senior Montero didn't explain over the phone what had happened, but from his tone, Valerio understood that the situation was serious. He hastily told his wife as he left, "I'll go by car." "Valerio, but it's dangerous, the roads are icy." "It's better to take the train." The man looked at his wife as if he wanted to burn her with his gaze. "You don't understand that my mother is in intensive care. She's very ill. Please, don't shout at me. I'm worried about you. I'm tired of your constant fussing." The next morning, Adelina learned that Valerio hadn't made it in time. His mother had passed away from a severe stroke without regaining consciousness. Her husband took the loss very hard. He completely withdrew into his grief and even stopped interacting with the children. But Adelina had to urgently tell about her own pregnancy. Postponing the decision was not an option. When Adelina found herself in the living room late at night, her husband, who had returned late, grumbled dissatisfiedly. "Why can't you sleep?" "Valerio, we need to talk." "Not this again. Don't you see that I'm exhausted? I don't lead a life of leisure either, and our children are also my responsibility. You don't show any interest in their affairs, and they get upset with you, especially Anton." The man wearily sank onto the couch next to his wife. For a moment, it seemed to Adelina that things were returning to normal. Valerio pulled his wife closer to him. "I'm sorry. Lately, I've been hurting you and being rude. But it's all part of the hardships we face. And my mother's death has completely shaken me. Valerio, I understand everything. Sometimes, I'm not myself either, but we can't handle the difficulties on our own." "That's true. Our mothers helped us tremendously, but now we'll have to manage on our own." "It's okay, we'll make it. The older children are already grown, so..." "Stop, Adelina. Did you say older children? What does that mean?" "I'm pregnant, and we need to decide something urgently because the timing is critical." The woman didn't expect her husband to react with fury to this news. "It amazes me how you, a grown woman, sometimes behave like a 5-year-old child. Don't you understand that we don't need this child? Why did you wait until the last moment?" Tears of hurt streamed down her cheeks. Against all reason, Adelina found herself justifying herself to her husband. "But you're always discontented, and I was simply afraid to approach you. I was waiting for the right moment, and then one misfortune after another happened." Valerio pointed at his wife's belly with his hand. "That's the real misfortune right there. You shouldn't have allowed this pregnancy. But, please, I wasn't the only one involved in this. Sometimes I have the feeling that you intentionally do certain things to spite me." "Valerio, how can you say such things? After all, this is our child too. And they're not to blame for anything. I'm not going to argue with you about this, but my decision is clear: you need to get rid of this pregnancy. We already have 2 children." The next day, Adelina faced another blow. She went for a consultation, and after the examination, the doctor said, "Sweetheart, you're late. You're already 14 weeks along. Soon you'll start feeling movement. So, you'll have to give birth to this baby. But my husband doesn't want it. I can't help with that. And what are you so afraid of? Based on your history, I can see that you're not in dire straits. Will another little one really burden you so much? After all, our joy is in our children. They are our continuation." After her visit to the doctor, Adelina decided to visit Nina. Her friend, along with her husband and their son Ivan, who was a year younger than Anton, lived on the other side of the city. When Nina saw Adelina, she was delighted. "Oh, long time no see. What brings you here? I heard about your misfortune. Accept my condolences." Nina quickly went through all the obligatory phrases before suggesting they go inside. "Come on, spill the beans. What did you come for?" "I'm going to have another baby." "Well, that's wonderful. Why are you crying?" "Valerio is absolutely against it. He ordered me to get rid of this pregnancy." Yes, life changes people beyond recognition. Not long ago, he was such a pleasant young man. A true example to follow. I watched your touching relationship and dreamt of such love. Adelina shared her concerns with her friend and, in the process, cried on her shoulder. "Thank you, Nina." "For what?" "For being here for me." "Oh, come on. Don't dwell on men so much. They're all the same, and that won't change. You just need to know how to turn the situation to your advantage." "I don't understand. What are you trying to say?" "Well, for example, stage some kind of incident. Make him worry." "Thanks for the advice, but I can't do that." "Suit yourself. But drop by if you need anything." It seemed that Valerio had forgotten about the conversation with his wife. He was going on business trips again and returning invariably in a bad mood. Adelina tried to maintain balance for the sake of the children's peace. She diligently threw logs into the almost extinguished fire of their family happiness, but the flame just didn't want to ignite. 2 months passed, and her growing belly became noticeable even under loose clothing. One evening during dinner, her husband calmly said, "You still went ahead with it, didn't you?" "Valerio, it was already too late. No one was willing to perform the operation." "Aren't there any other options? Herbal remedies, pills?" Adelina was horrified. "You're an educated person. And you're suggesting medieval methods for me to get rid of your own child? What if something happens to me? Have you thought about Aaron and Elena?" The man became flustered, realizing he had said something unnecessary. "I'm sorry, I really didn't think," I blurted out something nasty. Things calmed down for a while. In the summer, Adelina gave birth to another little boy, and Valerio was even pleased with this gift from his wife. What a coincidence that the father and son share birthdays. Little Matteo will grow up, and we'll celebrate together. By the time he grows up, you'll be an old man. Wrong answer. I'm only 33 now. That's the age of Christ, which is symbolic in itself. Strong drinks are sold in the store from the age of 18. So what? Well, if we do some simple math, we get 51 years. That's the best age for a man. For the second time in their years of marriage, Adelina witnessed the miraculous transformation of her perpetually grumpy husband into the old Valerio with whom she felt comfortable and at ease. With all her might, she tried to preserve this fragile happiness. After work, Valerio spent the entire evening with little Matteo. He played with him and rejoiced in his son's achievements. Aaron and Elena also actively participated in raising the youngest member of the family. But this domestic idyll didn't last long. Soon, Valerio started coming home late at night, and one day he disappeared for 2 days. Adelina's imagination painted the most terrifying scenarios, and she began calling her husband's friends and colleagues, but no one knew where he had gone. She was about to contact the police to initiate a search for the missing person when Valerio reappeared on his own. He brushed off the children's questions, who were also worried about their father, and attacked his wife. "What chaos have you caused? And you're scaring the children." "I'm scaring the children? You disappeared from home without saying a word to me. You could have at least called out of decency. Or do you not care about any of us? Adelina, you simply irritate me with your habit of exaggerating things. Any other woman would have understood the reason for our problems a long time ago, but you remain naively ignorant. Or are you pretending not to understand because it's convenient for you? I'm sorry, but what am I supposed to understand? Fine, I'll tell you. Just don't get offended. I'm tired of this gray existence. Look at yourself in the mirror. Has no one ever told you that you resemble a gray mouse? You don't even try to change, and I'm tired of mediocrity. I want bright colors and equally vibrant emotions. Adelina looked at Valerio and couldn't believe that these hurtful words were coming from her beloved husband. Valerio, snap out of it. What are you saying? I've already snapped out of it, and that's why I'm leaving. Valerio grabbed his travel bag and began packing his belongings. Adelina couldn't move from her spot. She couldn't believe that this was happening to her. Valerio, what about the children? Don't worry, I'll take care of the children. And by the way, I'm acting very nobly by leaving the house to you. And where will you go? I mean, where will you live? That's none of your business anymore. I've met a woman who makes my heart beat. With a confident stride, Valerio headed towards the door, but he turned back remembering something. I'll come by tomorrow for the rest of my things. Oh, and don't try to find me. We're parting ways forever, it'll be better for everyone. The door slammed shut, and a minute later, the powerful roar of an engine filled the air as the black SUV disappeared into the darkness of the winter night. Mommy, did Daddy leave us? The daughter looked at her mother, fear frozen in her eyes. How will we live without Daddy now? Aaron took his sister's hand. We'll live just fine. There are still real men in this house. Mom, if he comes back, I won't let him in. Adelina, still hoping for the best, tried to soften the drama of the situation. Sweetie, you can't speak that way about your dad. He's not a father, he's a traitor. Only a few days later, Adelina fully realized the extent of her personal catastrophe. Everything slipped through her fingers, and the children demanded maternal care and attention. The one in the most vulnerable position was 1.5-year-old Matteo. So, Adelina had no choice but to call Nina. She rushed over with Roberto. Welcome the saviors. We'll stay with you for a couple of days until the situation settles down. Have you called your parents? Not yet. That's right. Don't bother the old folks. Later, when everything calms down, you can tell them everything. Who knows, maybe your Valerio will go for the BLO. Well, I won't say it in front of the kids. But usually, most unfaithful husbands return beaten and humiliated to their well-established nests. Valerio won't come back. Are you sure? Almost 100%. So, there's still a small hope for the prodigal parrot's return. Sorry, I blurted that out without thinking. Well, we'll see how things go. Our family head is away on a trip, so Roberto and I will happily stay with you. Plus, we'll save on utilities. Nina winked at her friend, and Adelina smiled. Nina, I'm amazed by your ability to find positive aspects in any situation. Because I'm an optimist in life. And we need to do something with you, otherwise you'll completely sour. From that day on, Natalia took full responsibility for her friend's house and its residents. She advised Adelina to take a leave of absence to adjust to the new conditions. Natalia actively engaged in transforming her friend's life. Adelina, you need to completely change all your settings. I know it's difficult, but you have to try. Adelina tried to resist the overwhelming activity of her savior. Listen, Nina, I'll be turning 33 soon, and I think what you're suggesting is impossible. I agree that something needs to be done about my appearance. We can buy trendy clothes. But how do I change on the inside? If you really want it, you can achieve anything. Motivated people are capable of things that are simply astonishing. Of course, it's hard to tackle this task alone, but I know who can help you. Adelina became cautious. I didn't think you would send me to a psychotherapist. What's wrong with that? Sometimes people don't realize the seriousness of their problems, and a competent specialist can assess the depth and cause of the problem at first glance. No, I won't go. Calm down. I have an acquaintance who specializes in women's issues. We study together. But if you're against it, then I'll back off. But I would like you to agree. Trust me, you'll thank me later. I need to think. That's right, you're smart. Take a ride in your mind-blowing car and think. And we'll prepare dinner with our hungry elf pack. Elena jumped with excitement. Mom, it's so much fun with Aunt Nina. But who are these elves? They are very tiny people, but they can perform all sorts of miracles. And can they turn people into bugs? Well, they can only do that to bad people. What about Aunt Lucia? The women exchanged glances. Who's that? Elena looked at her mother and her friend as if they were the bugs themselves. As if you don't know. Aunt Lucia is Dad's girlfriend. I saw her when Dad and I went to the store to buy food for Mateo. She has black hair, but I didn't like her. Natalia was intrigued by Elena's story. Why? Is she mean? No, she's a pretender. She tells me I'm cute. But she has the meanest eyes herself. My mom is 1,000 times more beautiful. Adelina's heart felt calmer at her daughter's compliment. Okay, Nina, I don't want to hear any more about different aunts and doctors. I'll follow your advice and ride with the wind. Adelina circled the city for over 2 hours. She sang songs, talked to her husband who had traded her for some Aunt Lucia with black hair. Pouring out all her resentment to the silent night, she returned home. The children were already asleep, and only Natalia was waiting for her in the kitchen. So, did you blow off some steam? Thank you for the advice. I feel an extraordinary lightness now. I agree with your suggestion. I really need to completely change my life. The problem is that the grayness has seeped into me and doesn't allow anything to change. Adelina had never been so anxious. She was waiting for her turn in a soft chair that resembled a large ball, with the same soft, muted light pouring down on her. The atmosphere was very comfortable, and the tension disappeared. But the door opened, and a tall man in an expensive suit the color of wet asphalt invited her. Please come in, we and your friend are old acquaintances, and Nina has briefed me on your story. Adelina nodded and felt a betraying tremor throughout her body. The man sat opposite her in such a way that his brown eyes occupied her entire field of view. Don't be afraid, I'm not a real doctor. And who are you? Simply put, I'm a specialist in problems. I know where they hide and how to deal with them. And that's it? Isn't that enough? You've even stopped trembling, and that's already a good sign. To make our communication easier, Senora Lozano, I should introduce myself. I'm Leonardo Vincente. Pleased to meet you. Likewise. I actually adore women's company. But not because I'm a ladies' man and a slacker. It's just that every woman has her own mystery. Sometimes it is the cause of serious problems. And you know how to solve these problems? Do you always succeed? I won't lie to you, not always. But much depends on trust. If the client trusts me as a specialist, positive results are usually guaranteed. And how long will the treatment last? And how much will this pleasure cost me? Senora Lozano, this is not treatment in the conventional sense of the term. I have been dealing with modern women's problems for a long time, and I have my own system for solving them. You won't be subjected to any medicines, mixtures, surgeries, or other forms of intervention. So what is it all about then? You and I will try to find the key to your personal mystery that is hidden within you. Although Adelina didn't fully understand what Senor Vincente was talking about, his proposal intrigued her. I agree, and I will do whatever you say. That's wonderful. Then starting from tomorrow, start keeping a journal. Buy a regular school notebook and write down all your thoughts, fears, and worries in it. Make sure to note events at home, with your family, and at work. In other words, write down everything that comes to your mind. And what will come out of this? We will see together later. But I'm already sure that it will be interesting. Did you enjoy writing essays in school? Yes, I wrote them for half the class. I couldn't refuse, even though I knew it was wrong. And do you blame yourself for that? Yes, a little. Imagine, my husband left me with 3 children, and I can't rid myself of the feeling of guilt. I will definitely help you. But first, engage in creativity. Adelina bought a notebook and a whole pack of pens. She thought that this Senor Vincente was very strange, but decided to try his method on herself. At home, she opened the notebook and froze. Her mind was completely blank. She nervously chuckled, "Well, Adelina? What now?" And then the thought came to her that the first entry should be a description of this very fear. The fear of a blank page. When Adelina looked up, she realized that 2 hours had passed, if not more. Adelina looked in amazement at the notebook, which had been filled with no less than 20 pages. "Well, you did it, babe." She quickly turned off the light and went to sleep. Memoirs are memoirs, but sleep and work were still not canceled. In the morning, Adelina almost overslept, but she didn't panic. She cheerfully rushed around the house, getting the children ready. Sleepy Nina appeared on the stairs, watching her friend in surprise. "Adelina, what's gotten into you? Why are you running around like a propeller?" "Oh, Nina? Good morning. Shall we have breakfast together?" Nina continued to watch Adelina, while Adelina simultaneously sipped her coffee, applied mascara, and told Aaron what they needed to buy after school. Arriving at work, Adelina realized that she needed a notepad. So much was happening around her, and she hadn't noticed before. Now, the woman instantly formed her own opinion on what was happening in her mind, and she didn't want to forget it all. Take, for example, their security guard. He smiled every morning but never opened his mouth. She used to think it was just his peculiar trait, but then she found out that the security guard was constantly drunk. Adelina, on her part, had grown to dislike him, but someone at work mentioned that his entire family had died, and it was easier for him to live in that state. The week flew by unnoticed. Nina watched with interest as her friend diligently wrote something in her notebook in the evenings. One day she couldn't resist asking, "Listen, you look like a schoolgirl. All that's left is to stick your tongue out in concentration." Adelina laughed. "You know, I got so carried away with what Senor Vincente suggested to me that I even think I could write a book." Nina sat down across from her. "Well, what's stopping you? Take and write." "Oh, come on, Nina. I'm not a writer." The answer is not accepted. No one is born a writer right away. Oh, come on, stop it. Who cares about the experiences of a gray mouse? Nina smirked. I could never understand why you don't love yourself so hard. Why don't I love myself? But her friend didn't let her finish. Well, listen, you perfectly understand that you have an ordinary appearance. But you're smart, and you couldn't not understand that in this day and age, with such face, you can do anything you want. You just need to spend a little money on a stylist, a makeup artist. Moreover, everyone always predicted a dazzling career for you. But Valerio was your top priority. I can't understand why. And now, you didn't even think about my words, you just immediately said that you can't. And you never answered my question why. Adelina, to be honest, was taken aback. She didn't expect such words from her friend. Nina. Nina what? Who else will tell you all of this if not me? Adelina looked lost in thought. It seems that the shocks in her life are just beginning. Today she wrote even longer. She wrote about herself, about Nina, about their meeting. About the fear she felt when she was being dragged to the public toilet by the boys. She fell asleep with the notebook in her hands. The next day, she had to visit Senior Vincente. She waited again in some kind of crazy excitement, and when he sat down in front of her, she immediately calmed down. So, how are we doing? Don't be shy, tell me. Even if you've only written 4 pages, it's already progress. Adelina suddenly laughed. You know, Senior Vincente, before I started writing all this, I was convinced that my life was boring, dull, and now my confidence has been shaken. The man suddenly said, Senora Rubio, has anyone ever told you what a charming smile you have? No. I don't know, I don't remember. She felt a bit embarrassed and placed the notebook in front of him. He took it in his hands and looked at it in surprise. Wow, you've done great. Well, shall we figure out what's still gnawing at you? Adelina shook her head. You know, I would like you to read this without me. And then maybe we can talk about it. Well, all right then. Do you think there's still more to work on? Do you have anything else to write? She nodded her head. I never realized that there were so many different, big and small events happening around you. If you don't just list what happened in a day, but reflect on it, sometimes the most unexpected conclusions can be drawn. That's good to hear. Tell me, has your attitude towards any events changed after you wrote about them? Adelina nodded. I saw many things from a different perspective. You know, it even seemed to me that there are certain things I can change, places where I can help. So, what's the matter then? Don't be afraid to offer your help. Don't be afraid to take actions you haven't taken before. After all, you're here to change, right? They talked for about an hour. It seemed like Senior Vincente didn't say anything extraordinary, but Adelina felt a genuine surge of energy. She ran into a store, intending to buy a notebook, but after some thought, she decided to take 3. If she barely had enough for a week in one notebook, who knows how many more she would need. She stepped out, planning to head to her car, but her eyes caught a sign, Lily Beauty Salon. She had always adored lilies. Adelina hesitated for a moment. She had always gone to the same hairstylist, the same nail technician, but here. She decisively approached her car, placed the notebooks on the seat, and locked the car. Hello, please come in. A woman of her age looked at her, only she was vibrant and intriguing. And even though her hair color was slightly unnatural and her lips were a bit bolder than social norms dictate, the woman simply captivated the gaze. After Adelina settled into the chair, the woman asked, "What would you like to do? Just a trim?" "No, you know," Adelina turned to her, "I'd like to change everything. Completely. I'm tired of it." "Wow. That's very interesting." She turned Adelina towards the mirror and started contemplatively examining her reflection while continuing to speak. "I studied and then worked in the capital. And not just as a hairdresser, but as a master stylist. Then I fell in love, got married, and moved here. But besides a trim and a chemical perm, nobody here wants anything more. No, don't get me wrong, I have no regrets. I love my husband very much, but sometimes I crave something different. Only bridal looks provide some professional excitement. By the way, my name is Zerita. 2 hours later, Zerita turned Adelina towards the mirror. I didn't run right off the bat. For the first transformation, this will be enough. And something tells me that you won't stop here. Adelina opened her eyes and almost screamed. It was her and yet not her. Her hair had turned a very dark, chocolate shade. But when you moved them, light strands peeked through here and there, a couple of shades lighter. It gave the impression of a thick, lush mane on her head. Zerita shortened her hair, and now it fell right at her shoulders, cleverly covering her ears. Her eyebrows were tinted as if it were their natural color. Her eyelashes seemed straighter and thicker. I didn't apply any makeup to you. Firstly, it would be an even greater shock for you, and secondly, I think you look great as you are. Adelina finally managed to breathe in. And all of this won't wash off? Zerita laughed. Well, of course not. But I would advise you to come at least once a month to refresh the color. Adelina walked out of the salon and saw Senor Vicente coming out of the building across the street. She smiled, waved at him, and got into her car. Adelina didn't even know why her soul was singing so joyfully. Adelina entered the house. Apparently, Nina and the kids had decided to tear it apart. Aaron passed by. Somewhere in another room Elena squealed with laughter, and Nina joined her. Then Aaron came back. "Hi, Mom," he stood there, amazed, looking at her. He was called several times from the room, but he didn't respond. Then Elena's head appeared in the doorway. "Hi, M.O." Elena didn't finish her sentence. She looked at her mother as if seeing her for the first time. Nina, not waiting for anyone else, also appeared in the hallway, followed by the youngest members of the two families. Nina let out a loud exhale. "Well, babe, you've outdone yourself." Adelina felt a bit uncomfortable. "Does anyone plan to feed me?" Everyone started talking at once. Aaron and Nina rushed to the kitchen. Elena approached her. "Mom, you look beautiful." "Thank you, my sunshine." Dinner was lively. Perhaps it was the very first evening when nobody mentioned Valerio even once. As soon as Adelina entered the office, complete silence fell. "Good morning." Of course, Nina had warned her about the reaction. But Adelina couldn't imagine it would be this strong. Until noon, her colleagues just stared at her, occasionally asking something work-related. Just before lunch, their infamous heartthrob, Pablo, approached her. "Adelina, I was thinking, maybe we should have lunch together." She raised her eyes to him in surprise. She had never liked Pablo, despite the fact that all the women in the office under 30 were dreaming of being with him. And he was indeed good-looking, tall, in a good fit, always dressed stylishly, accentuating his masculinity. But he was also pompous and unintelligent, doing his job at work and not aspiring to anything more. Well, that was Adelina's opinion. "Thanks, Pablo, I'll enjoy my lunch on my own." She smiled charmingly at him but internally froze in horror. How could she have done that? Such a handsome man. Just because he noticed her and gave her a tiny bit of confidence, she should not only have lunch with him but also pay for these lunches. Pablo looked at her in astonishment, and the colleagues chuckled quietly. It was especially amusing for those whom Pablo had already dumped. He walked back to his desk and sat down. It was clear that the young man was bewildered and didn't know what to do next. Adelina was about to get up to go to lunch when the office secretary walked in. "Senora Lozano, the boss wants to see you." Out of habit, Adelina got scared, almost sat down, but then she thought, what, actually, should she be afraid of? She had everything in order at work, and her personal life shouldn't concern anyone. "You called me, Senor Lorenzo?" "Have a seat, Senora Lozano." "I didn't call you, I asked you to come in." Adelina sat down, not understanding what the boss needed from her. Senora Lozano, I monitor the work of my employees, and you always impressed me. And when your family troubles didn't break you, excuse me for knowing about them, and didn't affect your work in any way, I realized that you are the person I need. She asked. I'm sorry, but I don't quite understand. Need for what? My deputy has retired. I can't handle it alone, of course, and no one wants to live at work. And you have all the prerequisites to take up this position. Adelina was slightly stunned. Just like that? Straight to the deputy director? Although her education allowed for it. But for some reason, she had never even thought about making a career before. Now it was right in front of her, grab it and rejoice. She cleared her throat. Senor Lorenzo, I highly appreciate your offer. I am confident that I can handle it. But if you haven't forgotten, I have 3 children. In order to give you an answer and not let you down in the future, I need to talk to my parents. You understand that if they can't take care of at least the youngest one, I won't be able to accept your offer. That's what I like about you. You reason soundly and soberly, and that is invaluable. I'm allowing you to go home today, solve your problems, talk to your parents, and I expect your answer tomorrow. Adelina caught Nina packing her things. Where are you going? Adelina, I'm sorry, but my husband is coming back. Of course, I'll visit you often, but you know he won't understand my absence. What about you? Something happened? You look all disheveled and came early. Adelina told her about the boss's offer. Nina reached out. Well, what can I say, my friend? I believe in you. I'm sure that now everything will be fine. There's just one thing left, to believe in yourself. Adelina looked up at her friend. I believe. Almost believe. They hugged each other goodbye. The most important thing is for you to go. Don't give yourself time for self-flagellation and self-digging. Adelina laughed. Well, you're just like your friend, Senor Vincente. Nina looked at her slyly. By the way, speaking of him, can you tell me why he called me and asked a bunch of silly questions that were all about you? Adelina became flustered. Maybe what she wrote was the ramblings of a mad woman? And he wants to make sure once and for all to send her for further treatment? Okay, my friend, I'm off. In the evening, the children gathered in the kitchen. Mom, do we have guests? Yes, Grandma and Grandpa will come. Aaron looked at Elena, then at his mother. But they don't know about Dad. Well, they'll find out. And, in general, are you going to help me or not? We're going to help. Together, they had just finished setting the table when the doorbell rang. Senora Vidal immediately started lamenting. Oh Lord, it hasn't been that long, and you've grown so much. And Dad looked at Adelina. Daughter, I can't even recognize you. What's happened to you? A new life, Dad. A new life. He snorted and walked into the room. Wow, we're being welcomed like royalty today. Senora Vidal turned to Adelina. Daughter, did we forget something? It was clear that the woman was feverishly trying to remember birthdays and other dates. Mom, come in, you haven't forgotten anything. Everyone sat down at the table. The youngest, as usual, climbed onto Grandpa's lap. Adelina smiled. How about some champagne? Senor Lozano looked at his daughter more attentively. Adelina, I know you too well. Tell me, what happened? But then Senora Vidal intervened. Where's Valerio? Lately, he's hardly ever at home. It's not right for the father of 3 children to behave like this. Elena immediately burst into tears, and Aaron took his mother's hand. Adelina patted his head. Thank you, everything's fine, Mom. Mom, Dad, Valerio left us. Mikhail snapped, even thumping his fist on the table as if killing a cockroach. And Senora Vidal clutched her heart. Mom, it's not necessary. Everything is fine. We're getting used to living without him. I gathered you for a completely different reason." The woman looked at her daughter with astonishment. "How can you say such things? We need to bring your husband back to the family." Senor Lozano frowned but didn't interrupt his wife. "Mom, I have no intention of bringing anyone back. It was his decision. He's happily living with some new woman, and today I filed for divorce. But I need your help. Darling, you know. Today I was offered a new position." She spoke, and Dad admired her. He always said that his daughter would show everyone. And even gray mice are capable of something. Especially today, his daughter looked different and not at all like a gray mouse. Her parents offered to move in with her for the cold season. The children need to be taken care of, and it gets dark early. Mom, Dad, I never even dreamed that you would help me so much. The next visit to Senor Vicente fell on a day off. Adelina smiled, looking at the two filled notebooks. Senor Vicente was right. As soon as she wrote her problem, her fear, on a blank page, it didn't seem so big anymore. She didn't have to wait for Senor Vicente this time. He was waiting for her in his office. "Senora Rubio, I have a proposition. Let's have our conversation somewhere else today." She froze. "Well, I can see how scared you are. What's the matter?" And unexpectedly for herself, she laughed. "It's just my surprise. I would be delighted." They sat in a cafe with windows overlooking the park. Autumn is still a beautiful time. Senor Vicente looked at her. "You have changed a lot. Not just externally. You know, I even regret resisting Nina." The man smiled. "Nina cannot be resisted. You must understand that. Sooner or later, we were destined to meet. Tell me, I read your diary. Is it true that she saved you like that?" "Yes, I still remember her screams and the fallen enemies. Of course, it's impossible to describe it in words." No, you're wrong. You write with such vivid language that I could imagine myself there. I even felt the urge to disperse that gang myself." "Oh, come on. Honestly, I didn't even notice how I wrote all that. I didn't deliberately think about it. Adelina, may I show your diary to one person? He's like a wealthy patron, a reclusive writer. I could come up with many epithets for him. I promise that if you don't want to, we can stop at any time." "Stop what?" "You see, your entries would make a great book. It would be a guide for women who have lost themselves, written in an artistic and very understandable language. But I am not an expert in all this, which is why I wanted to show your writings to a professional." Adelina expected anything but this. Oh, Nina, could it be her idea that came into Senor Vicente's head? Although it doesn't seem very likely. Fine. Let's change everything if we're changing anything. Let's give it a try. That's great. That's just fantastic. Adelina, shall we stop talking in such formal tone? And by the way, it's worth celebrating with champagne. After the cafe, they walked for a long time. Leo told her how he always stood up for justice when he was little. He faced consequences for it in kindergarten, school, and at home. Adelina laughed. Did they teach you not to be fair-minded? No, quite the opposite. Maybe I have a not-so-great character. They say cut, but I still think shave. Tell me, Adelina, could we go to the movies together? Or to the theater? It's so hard to meet a woman these days with whom it's interesting to talk. Many women come to see me, but honestly, I consider them all patients. But you, I can't. I haven't been to the movies. Adelina paused. When was she actually at the movies? Probably when Valerio and she didn't even have Aaron yet. It's been a long time since I went to the movies. That's wonderful. No, not that you haven't been to the movies in a long time, but that I would be delighted to accompany you. One evening, Senora Vidal asked. Adelina, tell me, did Valerio call? Adelina turned to her in surprise. No, why would he call? Well, I ran into him accidentally at the shopping center yesterday. He was with that woman of his. But he had nowhere to hide, so he had to say hello. It's like he's twitching. You know, I even felt sorry for him. No, not in that way. He got all tangled up, got scared. Adelina was ready to reply sharply, but then she fell silent. She knew very well that her mother was worried about her. That's what mothers do. Leo disappeared somewhere. Although, it's clear where. After that movie outing, he drove her home and kissed her. She responded with such fervor that they couldn't bear to part. Apparently, he is indeed a smart man. Weighing all the pros and cons, he decided that 3 children were too much for him. Adelina didn't blame him. She was sure it wasn't because she was a gray mouse. There was a knock on the door, and her mother looked up. Who is it so late? Adelina went to open the door. But as soon as she opened it, she was engulfed. It was so overwhelming that she got scared. Adelina, he's taking it. He's taking everything on himself. The editing, the publishing. He's confident that it will become a real bestseller. Leo, put me down immediately. Leo put her down on the floor and looked sheepishly at the excited household members who had gathered due to the commotion. Senor Lozano glanced at Leo. I understand that we need to set the table for coffee? And this young man will tell us who he is and why he's carrying our daughter in his arms. An hour later, Adelina's father paced nervously in the room. I knew it. I knew my daughter would outshine everyone. Adelina, we're all with you, keep that in mind. She was flustered. Her profession, after all, didn't tolerate any philosophies. Everything had to be precise, calculated, measured. And here she was, faced with this. On the eve of the presentation, she was more nervous than ever before. She couldn't think of anything better than taking a pen, a clean notebook, and writing Diary of a Lonely Woman, Part 2. However, she didn't manage to start writing. There was a knock on the door. Valerio stood at the threshold. How many times had she imagined this meeting, and yet she was still flustered? Can I come in? Come in, of course. But the kids aren't here yet. I wanted to talk to you. To me? But haven't we already resolved everything? I gave up alimony, and you gave up the house. What other questions are there? He looked at her in surprise. You've changed. I had good teachers. Shall I pour some coffee? Yes, if I may. He walked into the kitchen. Did you change the furniture? Adelina felt oddly pleased watching his changed expression. Yes, it was outdated and old. Must have been expensive? Well, I earn decently. He looked closely at his ex-wife. Something was different about her. Something that made it difficult for him to talk. And then he realized there was no longing or sadness in her eyes. Yes, overall, she looked great. Much better than when they lived together. Adelina, I don't know where to start the conversation. I came here just to invite you somewhere. Me? But what about your Lucia? Valerio frowned. Lucia turned out to be different from what she was initially. Ah, and you decided to go back to where you felt calm and happy? Adelina, don't twist my words. Not at all. But still, I can't. I have no time at all. Tomorrow I have a presentation. He didn't let her finish. He immediately perked up. And I mean, we will be there. Don't you think it's a sign? And why are you going? You never liked such events. Well, Lucia, she likes being in the spotlight. Valerio was completely flustered. Valerio, go home. The kids will be here soon, and I don't want them to be disappointed. He obediently stood up. Well, we'll see each other tomorrow, right? She shrugged noncommittally. Adelina sat in front of the mirror in a flowing silver dress with her hair styled in large curls. Zerita applied the finishing touches to her makeup. Every time I work on you, I get a bunch of new ideas. It's a shame we can't bring them all together in one look. Adelina laughed. Well, who will I become then? Zerita looked at her attentively. Come on, tell me, what's bothering you? My ex-husband came by. He wants to come back. But nevertheless, he's attending today's event with his. Does he know that Adelina's notes was written by you? No, of course not. Then rejoice. Let him fully realize what he's lost. Adelina glanced at Zerita. You're cunning. Zerita smirked. No, just fair. Nina peeked in at them. Well, what are you doing here, fussing around? Everything is ready. People are coming in droves. Adelina peeked out and recoiled. I won't go there. Of course, you will. Everyone is eager for your autograph. Do you even know that almost the entire print run of the book has been sold out in just 2 days? Nina and Zerita practically pushed her into Leo's embrace. May I? They entered the hall, where the guests were already enjoying snacks and drinks amidst loud applause. Adelina closed her eyes for a moment, but then raised her head. She is a winner. And that says it all. Valerio, why are you standing there like a statue? Come closer, I need to get an autograph. Lucia impatiently tugged at his sleeve. He finally snapped out of his stupor. Leave me alone. Go if you want to. What? What kind of tone is that? Who do you think you are? He turned to Lucia. I told you, just go if you want to. But that's Adelina, my ex-wife. Lucia entered as if she had been doused with ice-cold water. Who? You've gone crazy, Valerio. You yourself said she works with computer technology. She does. Apparently, she was doing this in her free time. And you didn't know? No, Lucia, I didn't know. Amidst their argument, they didn't notice that Leo and Adelina had approached them, followed by her parents, Nina, and, of course, the children. Elena, with her characteristic frankness, spoke up. Daddy, you didn't believe me when I said this lady was bad. See, she's hurting you too. Adelina looked at her husband, her ex-husband. She and Leonardo had spoken and decided that she needed to do this to rid herself of the feeling of guilt. That same overwhelming feeling that nearly destroyed her, that it was her fault her husband left her. Good evening. Valerio turned around. Hello. Lucia fell silent. Adelina charmingly smiled at her. You wanted an autograph? Here, let me sign it. She reached out for the book that Lucia held, and Lucia mechanically handed it over before rushing away. Valerio looked at Adelina with a dark expression. What has happened to you? You weren't this angry, this cruel. Is it unpleasant for you to realize that someone you tried to crush didn't break but instead rose up? He glanced around. Everyone makes mistakes. I made one too, and I want to come back. We have 3 children, and you understand perfectly well that they need a father. Since when? All this time, they didn't need a father, and now suddenly they do? You're confusing things. It was you who decided when you wanted the children and when you didn't. Adelina, don't you dare talk to me in that tone. Leonardo felt Adelina's hand tremble and tightened his grip on it. She had to do it herself. Why? Because. He couldn't find the right words, and Aaron stepped forward. Don't you dare yell at Mom. See, now you've turned the children against me. Valerio, why are you saying all this? You've never been like this before. He fell silent. For a while, they all stood there in silence. Finally, Valerio looked at the man Adelina was holding onto. Then his gaze shifted back to Adelina. So, you won't come back? You don't want our family to reunite? Adelina smiled. No, Valerio, we don't have a family. And it's been that way for a long time. Adelina turned around, and they walked towards the stage. Valerio grabbed the arm of his ex-mother-in-law. Senora Vidal, you've always been smart and level-headed. Please talk to your daughter. We should be together. The woman looked at him. No, Valerio. It's too late. And you know what? I'm glad you got divorced. It shook Adelina up, and Leo, he truly made her believe in herself. I'm much more satisfied with Leonardo as my son-in-law. What? They what? Yes, Valerio, Adelina is getting married. And I'm confident that this husband of hers will never say she's a gray mouse who amounts to nothing. Senora Vidal slowly walked through the hall, and Valerio silently watched her go. Just yesterday, he was convinced that they would welcome him with open arms, seat him in the most comfortable chair, and love him even more. But everything went wrong. He turned around and rushed out of the hall. Now he had to find a way to make peace with Lucia. He couldn't possibly go live with his father. He didn't want to have anything to do with him, especially after Valerio had left Adelina. And as for finding out what had happened, he didn't even want to consider it concerning his son. Valerio took a deep breath of the cold air. His eyes caught sight of a poster, specialists needed for a new testing facility in Siberia. He smirked, tore off a number, tucked his hands deeper into his pockets, and walked down the street.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.